and we'll start our presentation. So it's a little bit of an introduction. I typed in the chat, but my name is Rebecca Galvan. I am a 4th year in material science, and I'm one of the Caltech Y Outdoor Committee leaders. So in a non-COVID world, I would help lead different camping and backpacking, as well as general outdoor adventures with the Y. And now in the time of COVID, what we're doing is we're trying to give you guys the resources to understand about the outdoor opportunities in the area, which you can explore as long as you use, proper caution and proper kind of understanding of the COVID world. So again, this is just an introduction to some great places in the area. Unfortunately, we are not currently running programs to go meet up and hike together, but hopefully we can still provide you guys with the resources to enjoy the fantastic outdoors. I also have Ben with me. He's going to be helping me with the presentation, doing the other half. Ben, if you'd like to give yourself a little introduction.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Rebecca did the heavy lifting in terms of contextualizing our presentation and what the Y is and is not doing right now. We'll get into maybe a couple more details of that later, but my name is Ben Heron. I'm a 5th year grad student in material science. Yeah, I work with the Caltech Y Outdoors Committee because I really like leading hikes and camping trips, and it's really fun to see the breadth of experience that people have or that might exist within a group on any hike or camping trip. And so, yeah, it's a good experience. We get to meet new students all the time, see people around campus that I went on the Y hike with 2 or 3 years ago. So yeah, it's a nice community aspect of what we do. Just quickly before we get started, I see we've got a couple of other grad students in here, as well as some staff and alum. So yeah, thanks to everybody, staff, alum, students, for joining us. It's really good to see people coming back for these. And I think that's one of the benefits that we have through the current format, the Zoom meeting format, that we don't necessarily have when we do these in person. So yeah, we appreciate seeing you here.
All right, so I will start with introducing hikes in the Los Angeles area. A little bit of an outline. We're going to talk about briefly why hike, and then we're going to talk mostly about where to hike. And at the very end, we'll finish up with a little bit of how to hike in the area. So why hike? Beautiful views, great exercise, and it's also just a really awesome way to explore the area, to see kind of different parts of LA. I think LA is a kind of hidden, unknown in many ways, gem of outdoor activities. So I think that there's a lot of great things, from sites to different sorts of adventures that you can have all around the LA area. Also, in the pre-COVID world, and hopefully in the near future, it's a great way to meet people or to just kind of have a social setting. So we are not doing this currently, but the hopes are is in the near future, we will be able to start returning to some of these planned and organized hikes. So do be on the lookout for those, as we are really hoping that we can return to some of them in the future. So where to go hiking? I've listed out a couple of the different areas around LA, and I will just particularly highlight, let me get my little pointer here, that these in the pink, the green, and the blue are areas that are more affected by the Angeles National Forest Fire, so the Bobcat Fire, and closures, and also have trails that are a little bit more, small track, less friendly for keeping your distance. So we're actually not going to be focusing on those trails right now. This talk, we're going to be focusing more on kind of these areas and some of the Bernardino National Forest. And really, actually, we're going to be focusing on this little area right here. So I'm going to talk about the hikes that are close to Caltech, that are pretty accessible from Caltech, and then I'll talk about some of the ones that are a little bit further away. So this is going to be a little bit of a dump. So I'm just going to kind of share with you some of these different places for hikes, ideas, and suggestions. And again, don't need to take notes. We're going to share all of this with you later. But one of my favorite kind of unknown gems is called Cherry Canyon. So Cherry Canyon is actually over kind of west of the Rose Bowl area, towards the Verdugo Mountains, but not actually in the Verdugo Mountains. It's about a 15-minute drive away, and it has these really beautiful areas that are the California oaks, and there's some ridge areas where you can actually see all of the surrounding LA city, an area, and at night it's got some really fantastic views of all the city lights, and it really does look like just kind of diamonds in an ocean. And so I really like the Cherry Canyon area. There's a couple of other places where they have some benches, some picnic tables. And if you like mountain biking, this is also a really good place to go mountain biking. They have some really great opportunities for mountain biking. It's well signed in terms of the trail. Some particular ones to point out is the Owl Trail. The San Rafael Hill, I think that's what it's called. That's why I said I think, but the trailhead is correct on the Google Maps link, so that's what you should go with. And then the Ridge Motorway, which is just above Route 2. So there is some highway noises, but if you like trail running, this is also a great place to go trail running. A little bit hilly, but I think overall a really cool place to explore. The other area, which is very close to Caltech and specifically JPL, is the JPL area, or the El Prieto Canyon area, again about 15 minutes away. And things such as the Gabrielino Trail as well as the Brown Mountain Trail are really, really beautiful hikes. They're oftentimes very green. There's some rivers flowing through. Again, if you want to make these hikes kind of a longer or more involved hike, there is opportunities to make very large loops, but they can also be kind of a simple afternoon walk, or just kind of some nice, pretty, and generally it's a little bit cooler. So there is shaded areas, which is nice. This is very popular with mountain bikes. So do be aware that there is some more traffic in this area. It is not necessarily the least trafficked hiking spots in the area, but it's more heavily trafficked for good reason. It's a very nice place to hike around and explore. Mount Lukens is just up the 2. So this area has just reopened after the fire. It was not directly affected, but it was certainly kind of getting close. And one of my favorite things about this trail is in the springtime, there's so many flowers. There are just, I would say, at least 20 different kinds of flowers that I count when I go up there in the spring. And you just wind your way up. Again, Mount Lukens is all the way up, a very long hike, but you can do shorter out and back versions of it all throughout. It is a little bit steep, but I think it's a really nice place to hike because it's got such a wide fire road, which makes it very easy to kind of keep your distance, and also just kind of see what's going on as you're hiking up along the mountain. And then lastly, in terms of the areas that kind of are close by, is the Verdugo Mountains. So the Verdugo Mountains, again, this one can be pretty hilly, so just as a little bit of a warning, but really a massive expanse of trails and areas you can go. So Whiting Woods is pretty steep, but it's a nice 3 to 3.5 mile hike up to Verdugo Peak. It's got some really fantastic views. And then La Tuna and La Tuna Canyon is, again, a more trafficked area, but also a really great place. They have big, wide roads, and there's a lot of different little things that you can explore off the trail. So I really like the Verdugo Mountain area. I think it's a really fun area to explore, and just kind of maybe even get yourself a little bit lost and then find yourself back to that main trail in that main area. They also do have, some flowers in the spring. In this picture here, these things are actually yucca plants. So they're the flowering yucca that come up, which if you've never seen a yucca flower, they're but those are kind of the bigger areas that have trail networks around Caltech, and I would say are probably the most easy and accessible. The last thing that I'm going to point out is called the Ernest E. Debs Regional Park, and I would say this is more of an area to go on a stroll or to just kind of hang out in nature. But again, it's a similar about 15-minute drive away, and they've got a nice pond. They've got nice views of downtown LA. It's just a really kind of calm area. A lot of paved roads or walkways, but also some dirt ones as well. So that's our recommendations for things that are good and nice and close to Caltech, so within about 15 to 20 minutes. And I'm going to turn it over to Ben to start talking about some of the places to hike that are a little bit further away and maybe offer a little bit more variety than the ones that are super close.
Sorry, let me switch over to controlling the screen here. Thanks for taking that part, Rebecca. So I don't know how this image ended up on this page. Maybe that was added later, but no, this is a good image. So we're moving to the west side, Santa Monica Mountains for this section. And this image actually is perfect for this because the way that I would describe Santa Monica Mountains or the hikes around there as compared to some of the ones you just saw is that the mountains are a little bit less rugged or intense than some of the ones in Angeles Crest or Angeles National Forest or the Baldy area or even San Bernardino. So if everybody can see the mouse here, where I'm kind of hovering over on the map here in the upper right, I would say is some more intense hikes, more prone to find trails that are kind of steep. They're still really fun. But then as we go further west and a little bit south from there, things get a little bit less intense and you see more of this kind of wide fire roads and very hilly landscapes and things like that. So some benefits of this area, Santa Monica Mountains, you can see the ocean from many of these hikes or from many areas even other than these hikes. It's usually cooler over on the coast. It's a bit more humid, but it's on average 10 degrees cooler than it is over by Caltech or more in this desert area. That's kind of the marine layer effect. There's really unique scenery over there, really interesting plants and even geologic formations. It's a bit farther away. Some of these you can get to within 45 minutes or an hour. If you go a bit farther out or if you hit bad traffic, it can take you longer than that. And then here we have this kind of roughly 2 hours driving that I would say if you pick a good time to go or if you don't hit bad traffic, then that 2 hours could be somewhere close to your round trip time. Or if you do hit bad traffic, then this being Los Angeles, that could be a time each way. So definitely worth going, but plan your day around getting there as well. Okay, let's see.
Quick heads up, Ben.
Yeah.
We cannot see your mouse when you're pointing to things on the screen.
Oh, okay.
Can people see it now?
I can see the red little dot kind of above the map. There it is on the map.
Okay.
Okay,
Awesome.
So thank you for pointing that out, Rebecca. So these are the mountains I was talking about here underneath our image. And you'll see these come up again in a later map. These are the ones that are a little bit more intense. And then as we go from here out to west by southwest, you'll see a little bit less intensity in terms of the trails and the slopes. Okay, hopefully that cleared that up. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just gonna quickly go through some of the hikes in this area. There, as you know, as Rebecca mentioned before, this isn't an exhaustive list, but it's kind of a good introductory list to things. Sandstone Peak is in the Santa Monica Mountains. It's a 6-mile loop. It's got 1,400 feet of elevation change, so it's a little bit less, as I mentioned, less steep than some things north of here. It's got really good views. It's a well-maintained trail. It says good Santa Monica Mountains, which is, I agree with that statement. One thing you'll notice too, as you get further west, is that there are a lot more people that live, or that the population density, I would say, is a bit higher as you get closer to the coast. So in the Santa Monica Mountains, for example, these are usually pretty well-trafficked trails, at least in some areas. And well-trafficked trails in a place that might gather funding for trail management means well-maintained trails. So another one is Serrano Canyon, also in the Santa Monica Mountains. It's an 8-mile loop. It's a little bit longer, but the elevation change, as you can see, is a bit lower. It's 700 feet. So this one's a bit milder in terms of intensity. It's again a well-maintained trail. It's got a lot of stream crossings, so it's something worth planning for that. And then it's kind of got these grasslands that are set up against Boney Mountain, which is a nice, it's a nice view that way. A lot of wildflowers out there. As you can see, we have an image of one in the kind of right-hand side of the slide. And you can see the Santa Monica Mountains in the ocean in some spots of this hike. Okay. Waiting for it to go to the next slide. There we go. Okay. Sycamore Canyon, or the Old Boney Trail. This is in the Santa Monica Mountains, a bit closer to Malibu. There are lots of different loops in this area that you can choose to adjust the length of your hike, which is actually really nice thing. It's kind of a modular effect there. The elevation change depends on those loops, but it's probably somewhere near what you saw on the last slide and you see on the right-hand side here of this slide. There's pretty unique grassland scenery, lots of wildflowers again, ocean views again, which is really great. And then fossils, and there's an image of a little fossil on the bottom left here. So that's pretty exciting. It's always cool when you can mix in some fossils or cool geological structures into your hike. The Parker Mesa Overlook is in or near Topanga State Park. It's 6 miles round trip. Again, pretty mild elevation changes. With, again, ocean views. You can see Santa Monica Bay and the pier. It has really good views at night. I would say that's pretty true for a lot of hikes that at least look over the city or certain geographic aspects. If you can see it at night, it's pretty fantastic. But if you do go hiking at night, bring lights and whatever else you might need for your safety, and we'll go over a little bit of that. And this, again, is a well-maintained trail. And you can see, actually, on this image that was taken from a website, actually, there's sometimes with this marine layer, there's this kind of mist or fog effect that provides a pretty cool visual effect. Okay, the last one I'm going to go over in this section is Point Dune, which sounds cool but isn't spelled the way you'd think. It's in Malibu, and here's an image of Point Dune here. It's not necessarily a hike, although I'm sure you can make a hike out of some of these smaller trail networks. The highlights really for Point Dune are that there's a beach here, and you can see that on the left-hand side. There's rock climbing. It's really good for ocean views and the sunset. And actually, I would say that when you think about Malibu, thinking about rock climbing or bouldering in a few areas over there is also worth doing. So if you plan a trip out there, there's actually quite a bit to do. Okay, this next one is short. This section is the Hollywood Hills or Griffith Park. It's right in the middle here of our map. And really the highlight here is Griffith Park itself. It's got great views of the city at day or at night. I'm not sure if you can get to it at night, depending on time of year and all that. You can get there with public transportation, which is not something you can say about all of Los Angeles. And you can hike to the Griffith Observatory or to the Hollywood sign. So Griffith Park is considered, I would say, like one of the more essential experiences of hiking in this area. The last section I'm going to go over is San Bernardino Mountains. So this area over here that I'm kind of going around with the pointer is the map that we just looked at. And then if we zoom out and go a little bit to the east and southeast, these are the San Bernardino Mountains, San Bernardino National Forest. It's a couple hours away. These are pretty intense hikes. This range includes the highest peaks in Southern California. And the first one that I'm going to talk about is the highest peak in Southern California. It's San Gorgonio. One route to get to that peak is about 17 miles with 5,500 feet elevation gain. It's very hard. I actually took a slightly different route when I did this back in May of this year. It was about 20 miles, similar elevation gain, and yes, absolutely hard. So these are, some of these hikes are a bit more intense. If you're experienced and you're feeling pretty fit, then these are worth looking at. If you aren't as experienced, then I would say get used to hiking in the area, get used to some of these more intense hikes before you come to San Bernardino. But absolutely you should take a look at doing these, because being on top of the highest peak in Southern California is actually a pretty cool experience. Another one would be San Bernardino Peak, similar in length and elevation gain to San Gorgonio. And then Mount San Jacinto, that peak is at almost 11,000 feet. So it's maybe 700 feet shorter than San Gorgonio Peak, but still pretty high up there. This one's pretty interesting because you can take a tram to a lodge and then do a 10-mile hike round trip to the peak. Or you can do Cactus to Clouds, which is a hike that goes from Palm Springs, which is down near the base of the mountain, all the way up to the top. And this is known for being the hardest hike around, or one of the hardest hikes around. So this is 20 miles up and then back to the tram, and it's 10,300 feet elevation gain. So this one's very intense. So that's kind of our summary of the hikes. We would be remiss if we didn't go over some of the other considerations to make when picking a hike and deciding to go on one. You need to think about permits. In the San Gabriel and San Bernardino Mountains, you'll need an adventure pass in order to park your car and go on a hike there. And you can either use that day adventure pass, which is $5, or you can purchase an annual pass for the forest for $30, or you can use a national parks pass, which is, I think this last year it was $80 for a national parks pass. It's usually within the range, 70 to 85.
It is $80.
It is 80 this year?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. I see a couple notes in the chat. We'll come back to those in a minute. Thanks for your thoughts in there too. As far as traveling to these hikes, it's important to have a car or to have a friend with a car. And we'll talk about the particulars of that in just a second. As far as the nearby trails, the ones that Rebecca was talking about, sometimes you can bike to them, or in the case of Griffith Park in particular, you can take public transit to get into the area. And these nearby trails also include things like Eaton Canyon or Echo Mountain that we didn't talk about as much, but they're nearby and they're easy to find and well trafficked. In normal times, non-COVID times, you could also go with a group like the Caltech Y. So this is something that we would do at least once a month during the normal times, the before times, and that we plan to resume as soon as it's safe and the recommendations from the CDC and the Caltech rules based on public health recommendations allow us to do that. And this note here, I said we'd talk about this a little bit more. You need to be mindful of CDC guidelines, use safe practices when going on these adventures or these hikes. We don't want to unknowingly and unintentionally spread COVID into any other communities, and we don't want to bring COVID back to the Caltech community or to campus. So be mindful of those things when you consider going with friends on hikes. It's good if you go with people who are already kind of in your bubble. I don't have time to go through the whole permutation of how to approach these things, but we'll trust that everybody can think through that for themselves and make good decisions. The slide is not going. 1 second. Okay, the next note would be do your research on these things. On any of these hikes, you want to have a trail map or a guidebook, or for most of us, the most likely option is to use the internet. Websites like Modern Hiker and SoCal Hiker, you can Google it. You can use caltopo.com. All of those are good resources for understanding the trail and the terrain that you're going to get into. If you can, print something off and bring it with you, because you never know when technology could malfunction or even straight out fail. So it's good to have these maps on your cell phone, of course, and you should have that, or whatever device you want to use, but a good printout will get you a long way if a battery dies or something like that. Make sure you understand the current trail and road conditions, fires and road closures. We'll come back to that note in a second, and I see some activity in the chat regarding fires and road and trail closures, so we'll go over that briefly after the main talk. And you want to be aware too of what restrictions or conditions are placed on parking, including permitting. Another resource I want to point out is that the Alpine Club at Caltech has a library of hiking guides. This is something that is really useful for people who want to go to hikes in the area, because the Alpine Club is good at sharing their expertise and their experiences with the community in terms of the hikes that their members have done. This is something that the Y Outdoors Committee is also kind of working on a little bit, and we hope to have some of our experiences or hikes uploaded to a website at some point that we can share with people. Second while this slide advances. Okay, another really big key consideration is the weather. So for any trail you want to do, check the suggested hiking season, because it can be, in the case of, and I know in the chat a couple people were mentioning the, some of the San Bernardino trails and some others. In the case of these really high elevation peaks, at least for the area, it can be May, and it'll be in the 80s or 90s in Pasadena, and sunny and hot, and we can go hike anything. But if you go to, for example, San Gorgonio, there will be snow above 8,000 feet. So check the suggested hiking season for any of these things and be prepared for a variety of conditions. In the summer, avoid sun-exposed trails, and be aware too that when you go hiking in the summer, you will want to adjust the amount of water that you bring with you. You should bring more than you think you will need, absolutely, because even if everything goes perfectly well, you'll be amazed at how much water you'll drink in the heat. And if something doesn't go perfectly well, you'll be thankful that you have extra water. The higher elevations around here will be a little bit cooler in the summer too, so that's something to consider if you want to beat the heat on particularly hot days. In the winter, avoid Mount Baldy or other mountains with icy conditions. Some of these trails will be totally intractable in the winter, so be aware of that. And if you expect or can learn through the expertise of others that have posted things on the internet or in trail guides that there will be ice or even snow, bring crampons if that's recommended, or be prepared for slick conditions. If you think there will be slick conditions, then maybe don't go and choose something else, because safety first. Another thing to think about is creeks and waterfalls, and this is more on the side of benefits. So in late winter and spring, some of the creeks and waterfalls will have water, whereas later in the summer they may not. So if you're planning something with water features, natural water features, then it's worth thinking about whether or not they'll actually have water in them when you go. In terms of preparation, this is more of equipment and gear. Bring at least 2 liters for any hike. That's a good kind of standard to work with. As I said before, it's worth looking at trail guides too and recommendations from other hikers to adjust upward in terms of the water you bring in case that's recommended or it's hot. I wouldn't really adjust downward from 2 liters to something less though, even if it's a short hike. Bring a sun hat, sunscreen, and sunglasses for sunny conditions in Southern California. So almost always there will be sunny conditions. Even if it looks overcast, there's lots of exposure. Bring a first aid kit, or if you're going in a small group in your immunity bubble, then have somebody bring a first aid kit. And I would add a note onto this. Before you go, know what's in that first aid kit. Make sure it has what you need and know how to use at least the key pieces of it. Bring food if you're going on a hike that's longer than a short hike. Even if you're on a short hike, I would bring a snack, but bring snacks and a lunch. If you're going in low light conditions or you're going on a longer hike where you could be out longer than you planned, bring a headlamp or a flashlight or both, and bring some garbage bags. It's always good to have garbage bags. You can pack in and pack out your trash. You can, if you're a bit of a survivalist, you can use garbage bags for lots of different things. And dress appropriately for any of these hikes. You want to bring comfortable hiking shoes, lightweight pants or shorts. We don't recommend jeans. Hiking in jeans usually leads to suboptimal comfort. And the fabric doesn't perform well in kind of athletic uses, so I don't recommend that. And dress in layers. Especially for what could be inclement weather. Layering smart will get you a long way. Okay. Waiting again for the slide to go. Okay, so there are some expectations for any hikers. Some of you may be well aware of this, but we'll just go through it because we want to be responsible about that. One principle we want to follow when we go hiking is the leave no trace principle. Pick up any trash that you may create or generate, and if you feel like it's safe to do so, you can always help increase the cleanliness of the trail by using that garbage bag you brought with you to pick up trash that you see out there. During COVID times, maybe not advisable, but in general times, you can do this if you feel comfortable and safe doing that. Stay on the trail. Of course, that's a key aspect of trail maintenance. We want to stay on the trail that is set for us because we don't want to degrade the landscape around it. And even in muddy conditions, it's recommended to hike on the trail rather than go to the sides of the trail in order to avoid creating muddy tracks. It's better to just stay through the mud and keep the trail the width that it's been set by those who created it. We want to respect others on the trail during COVID. This is something that we've gone over a little bit. This is especially key. Maintain your distance from others and do your best to help them maintain distance from you. We want everybody to stay safe and healthy. And this last point is something where if you weren't enjoying it, then maybe you should be rethinking how you're doing your hiking. Find some way to enjoy it. Find something that you want to do or you want to see, and then plan your adventures around that. So that's a good way to not view hiking as a slog, in case you're concerned about that. Woodsy the Owl wants to remind you, give a hoot, don't pollute, keep your forests clean, keep our forests clean. That's how we get to keep the privilege of using them. If you have any questions about any of this, or you want to be part of the outdoor committee, or you want to plan things with the outdoor committee, you can always contact Rebecca or myself. In a second, I'm going to open this up more generally to questions, but I want to quickly revisit the chat first. So,
something that I will say in terms of kind of from the chat is for Strawberry Peak, my understanding is that it is still closed because I think that whole area, my understanding is that it is still closed. I'm not sure that I necessarily have the most up-to-date information. I've found All Trails is sometimes a little bit behind what the actual openings are. So the Forest Service website will have what areas are open and for hiking and what areas are not. So the Forest Service will be the most up-to-date information about that.
Okay, yeah, what was that?
Oh, I was gonna say, did you have anything else to add then?
Oh yeah, so I'm just keeping pace with what you were saying, and also what the audience is saying. Somebody tried to do this hike yesterday, some user on All Trails, and the Strawberry Peak Trail is closed because of the fires, and it may not be safe to hike for a good while. So for Strawberry Peak, they'll ticket your car if you park there while the people who distribute tickets are on shift. So yeah, something worth keeping in mind. And the other two notes are about the San Bernardino Peak Trail. It seems like that's largely inside the El Dorado Fires perimeter. So that's worth checking to see if it's open before you go, because that's in the range of mountains. It's a bit further away. It would be a big old bummer if you got all the way out there ready for a nice hike and found out you couldn't do it. And a similar consideration for Gabrielino Trail. I haven't been there since the fires. The question is posed, I guess anybody can try to help us answer this if they know. If anybody's been to Gabrielino Trail since the fires, is it open or is there a section that's open? Feel free to either speak through your microphone or through the chat on that. But, I think what we might do then is, if this works for you, Rebecca, we'll just open it up to general questions.
Yeah, and I will say that I do know of someone who has done a trail run on the Gabrielino Trail since the fires, in fact, within this past month. That being said, this individual is not good at reading signs. So I don't know They didn't get in trouble, but I'm not sure if it's advised or not. So I'll just put that out there.
One other thing I didn't mention much before, but that I think is worth mentioning, and I might add a note on this for the next iteration of this PowerPoint, is when you prep for these trails, be aware of what kind of wildlife you might encounter. There are some areas where it's important and quite relevant to know whether or not you could run into or be within a few miles of the territory of like a mountain lion or a black bear or something like that. There are black bears that wander into Sierra Madre, which is less than 5 miles away from us here. So not something to be, not something to let you deter, not something to deter you from going hiking, but just be aware of that and know how to prepare yourself for it and stay safe. Any other questions from anybody or thoughts, concerns?
If you could just pick one hike, which would be your favorite, and why would you pick it?
Oh, so the problem is the hike that my go-to for this is now burned and not accessible. But I think if not that, the one that I would actually recommend would, this is hard. There is a hike called the Los Leones hike, or to Parker Mesa, over in the Santa Monica, Malibu area, that I really like. It's a somewhat steep trek up, but the first part is pretty green and nice, and the last part is up on the mesa, and you get a really fantastic view of the ocean. Really beautiful, great place to go grab lunch. So the Los Leones to Parker Mesa Bluff is one recommendation that I would give.
Yeah, that I'm kind of similar to Rebecca in that a lot of the things I would recommend are currently inaccessible. Yeah, I agree. There are some really nice hikes west of here. One thing I really like about the Santa Monica area is that there are tons of hikes that are like just at the end of the neighborhood, and it starts on a fire road or something like that and goes, 5 miles in one direction or something. And that's really fun. They're nice and wide, and you can bike them or run them or any of those things. I would say in the before times, the hike to Mount Baden-Powell is a really fun one. And if you, I can't remember which landing you leave from, but there is a landing or a trailhead that goes to Baden-Powell, and on the way you can take a 1 mile or so or half-mile detour to go to Fruit Peak. That's a really fun hike. And to kind of follow on to that, for the hikes in the 3 areas that we didn't discuss today, we may, if we see some recovery in the trail and access opened back up, be able to do a session of this where we talk about those trails too. Normally we do that. Normally we spend a good amount of time talking about those, but because we can't get to them right now, we didn't cover them much, but the hikes there are pretty glorious. A quick note, underscoring the relevance of wildlife. Somebody did see a black bear in Millard Canyon around Labor Day, which is pretty cool as long as everybody was safe. So it sounds like everybody's okay. I assume if somebody was not okay after that encounter, we would have also heard about that. Any other questions? Oh, good. Yeah. The encounter was remote encounter. The bear was socially distanced.
Thankfully, black bears are skittish. So as long as you are in groups and not sneaking up on them, oftentimes they will keep their distance from you. So it's nice news. We don't deal with the grizzlies, which are much scarier. But yeah, if you guys do have questions that come up later, you have our emails, and you're always welcome to reach out to us. We hope that this presentation was able to give you a little bit of insight into some of the areas and trails that you can go on in the area, and that you have the chance to go out there and enjoy some of the LA adventure. I'll stick around for a little bit more if anyone wants to talk to me afterwards, but thank you so much for coming to this Adventure 101 talk, and we hope to see you in some of our future Adventure 101.